Welcome back to the Self-Esteem and Confidence Mindset podcast with me, Johnny Pardo, here to coach you from self-doubt, self-confidence to get to where you want to go. Today, I've got a very special guest with me. Welcome, JJ.
Hello, thank you so much, Johnny, for having me. I'm excited to be here and to be able to add some value to you and your listeners. So I've been looking forward to this all week.
Me too. And it was great. We haven't known each other for too long, but it was great to connect. And already I can see the immense value JJ's giving to the world. So it was definitely one that I knew I had to invite on this episode today. So yeah, really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. So I'll just do a quick introduction into JJ and he can tell us a little bit more about what he does and his story a little bit. But I met JJ in the personal growth world. Like I meet quite a lot of people these days in a fantastic growing environment. So JJ is actually also part of the neuroencoding community I'm in. And for those of you not so familiar with neuroencoding, it's about getting us to default to our best behaviors by changes in our psychology. So I met JJ in that environment, but JJ helps work with people in a mixture of different careers, so creatives, entrepreneurs and coaches, and really helps them work through that inner critic, which is something we talk about a lot on this podcast. So JJ, I've done a brief little introduction about you, but would you like to say a little bit more about what you do and what got you to where you are today?
Absolutely. Thank you for that wonderful intro. Yes. So what I focus on really is building that confidence for high performance individuals, anything from entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, entertainers, and coaches. Because one thing that we know for sure is that everybody deals with that inner voice, that inner critic inside of our mind that prevents us from reaching our greatness at times. And it also propels us to do extraordinary things. And so what led me to that, like I said, what I focus on is building that confidence, that unshakable confidence for high performing individuals. And I guess you could say that my level of expertise is inner critic, and that's where I specialize on because of my background. And I've spent about 30 years or so in the entertainment industry in a previous life, previously to devoting myself to coaching the self-development space, where I learned a lot through decades of living a life of having the external world criticize me just to be able to put food on the table, and as many of any single person has ever seen, a singer, an artist, a painter, an actor, a musician, whatever that case may be, we admire the artistry. We admire what we see. What we fail to remember is that they're humans just like you and me. And within that goes a lot of self-criticism, a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of beating yourself up to get to a certain point to where you can put your best foot forward and share your light and your gift and your artistry with the world, knowing that the world is led by negative content rather than positive content, which is why the news and media is so popular, And so within that, what I learned in my experience was that as I spent nearly 3 decades of my life, not only criticizing myself, judging myself, being judged by my family, being ridiculed by my family or friends or peers, being judged by people that are going to help either choose to represent me, such as agents, producers, directors, that are going to help me elevate myself in my career, to not only go through all of that judgment and in between judge myself continuously, then to be judged by the exterior world of whether or not people like my artistry or not. So it was decades of judgment, of criticism, of the external and the internal critic. And within that, I realized and recognized that most entertainers, and this is why a lot of people that we know, love, and trust, that we see in the media or movie stars or actors or singers or whatnot, go as far as taking their own life. Mm-hmm. We see one thing, but don't recognize what's going on behind the curtain, behind closed doors, people like Robin Williams and such, that
Amy
end their
Winehouse.
life. Exactly, Amy Winehouse, people that dedicate themselves to giving everything that they have to the world, and specifically somebody like a Robin Williams who expresses happiness and joy and brings so much wonderment to the world, for the world to not even have a clue that there's a man dying inside. And so what I learned was what makes that person, that entertainer, either drown or succeed in such a grueling business like entertainment, let alone a very what could be perceived as a superficial industry in Hollywood, in the city of Los Angeles, or where I'm at right now in Las Vegas. And so when I started practicing this thick skin that everybody talks about that you should have, especially being an entertainer, I learned that there was a lot more to that. And then I started building my tools encompassed with self-development tools, and then basic acting and performing skills that we use to develop characters that people love and trust from on camera or on stage or in a concert or in a music video. I realized those same tools, if applied correctly, can be used to also deconstruct the characters we create in our own mind, hence the inner critic. And so my background goes into that, and that's how I started specializing and learning about that. And after so many years of being in that business, and learning that I can use these tools that not only helped myself and overcome that negative self-talk that prevented me from reaching the life I wanted to live, I could also duplicate it and teach it to other people to do the same, regardless the industry that they're in.
Yeah, love that. And I love the point you're making about, and it's a really, really great cause and mission you've got there in terms of helping people at that level as well. And I think the kind of point I really wanted to pick up on was when you were talking about, these people we see on the outside as really, really doing well and high achieving, inside can be miserable as, anything. And that can come down to that self-talk they're doing, because of the way they've been influenced by perhaps media and society a little bit. So I think often people can feel a bit isolated when they're criticizing themselves. So I'm really, really glad you shared that it's at quite a high level. And one other thing I was going to touch on was kind of the thing I bring up a lot is imposter syndrome, when we feel like we're not worthy of doing something, or we don't belong there. We like what we're doing. And do you find imposter syndrome was something that came up a lot with these high performers or in your own career?
So thank you for bringing that up, and I have a different take on imposter syndrome. I know it's a real thing, but I also know that it's now being used more as a crutch to be able to say I have imposter syndrome as a defense mechanism to really address a more profound issue. And my take on it is that when I deal with high achievers and I have clients that I'm able to help them, and I'm talking strictly the ones that only discuss about achieving a certain thing and not feeling that they're deserving of, or they're not worthy of, or it's still not good enough because XYZ. That's when I'm more or less gearing towards the imposter syndrome aspect of it. But for me, what I helped my clients and myself realize is that, why is imposter syndrome a bad thing if we are all imposters until we're not? Every single one of us is an imposter until you develop a skill, learn a tool, have experience, get knowledge, are in proximity, have practice, develop an essence of whatever it is that you're, whatever industry you're in, and I know that there's different takes on it. And again, this is a perspective that I'm offering, but if you will, for a second, go back to your childhood. Mm-hmm. Every child you ask, every kid, you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a fireman. What do they do?
Yeah.
Or a police officer, an actor, or this, or a gamer now, or a whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whatever the case may be, they first start with an idea. I want to be this. What do they tend to do? They tend to try to mimic and embody it and copy it and pretending. Why is that so different than being an imposter? We've got, like, if you ask every high achiever that's ever created something, 9 times out of 10, they have no idea what they're doing until they do it. 9 times out of 10, they don't figure out how it works until they figure out how it failed. Much like that Thomas Edison light bulb, how many ways did it take for him to figure it out? 10,000 times. However you read that information, it's like, what is it that we choose to focus on that allows us to believe that we're truly in that imposter syndrome box? But if you really detach the emotional component, it's like, what I dislike or disagree, and this is my personal opinion about using the word imposter syndrome, is that the word syndrome gives us permission to feel a certain way and excuse ourselves from the bigger picture of where we should be focusing and what we should be paying attention to. I have a syndrome. Don't mind me. It's just my syndrome. It's what I have to deal with. Versus really attacking what really is. I believe that this imposter syndrome is more of a symptom than a problem. And when you really start approaching it from that perspective, what I've found, not only for myself, from my experience, and for those that I coach and help overcome that, I recognize that when you shift their perspective, when you change the emotional component from the verbiage that they're using to describe what they're going through, and you're able to decipher, if you will, the message through the madness, which is our inner critic, regardless whether it's just the inner critic or whether it's just what you perceive as being the imposter syndrome, you're able to gain so much more clarity on actually addressing what the problem is. And 9 times out of 10, it isn't what you think it is. It's something that's deeper rooted. It's a programming that's been instilled in us from our surroundings, our upbringing, our peers, our family, or anything else from birth to the point in time that you feel, think, or perceive yourself as having imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I really, really love that perspective on it. Really, in terms of looking a bit deeper, and actually, like you and your other point about there is an extent where at the beginning of someone's expertise when they're starting out that we don't know what we're doing. I mean, I did that in my coaching business. You probably did that in your coaching business and your entertainer business when you're starting out. Actually, we didn't necessarily know what you're doing. You just grew that expertise. But yeah, I really like how you talked about it being a symptom rather than that cause and that underlying problem in particular. So one other thing I picked up on was what you were talking about, kind of the way we look at perspectives. And for me, one of the key things that I'm very, very careful, and as our mentor Joseph always says, one of his 6 things, the words we speak, I'm always very, very keen on the words we're saying out loud. And is that something you really like to encourage people you work with to do, to really pay attention to the words they're using to describe themselves?
100%. And in fact, there's something that I'm extremely passionate about, which is deciphering truths versus perspectives, and what that means to a certain person. And what we speak into the universe, it is what creates our existence. And also, and I love that you said that you're keen on paying attention to what it is that you say. But sometimes what we say, even the most enlightened people, or the ones that are the most in tune with their vocabulary, when something comes out, it came out for a reason or a purpose. And it just it's a matter of either perspective or the person's truth. And that's something that every single person at one point or another has to kind of connect with their source, go within, figuring out where did that come from. Because I do believe that the words we speak is the life that we create. And with that goes why I believe it's, if you really are in tune with what the inner critic is, or what imposter syndrome is, or it's understood to be, your words can help redirect your focus so that you can overcome either or.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's even when someone's asking you, for this kind of my view, how are you? I'm all right is completely different to I'm feeling pretty awesome today. You know, that can really have a different perspective in it. So but I also like what you said about actually unleashing some truth and perhaps something you don't realize, and just paying a bit more attention to it and being that level of, well, increasing that level of self-awareness. So
I love what you just said. If I may real quickly touch on something that you just said, on something so simplistic as a person saying to someone else, whether it's someone they know or in passing, how are you? Right? And someone responding with, I'm all right, versus I'm having the most remarkable day ever, or my life is in utter shambles, right? It also goes to it also pertains, in my perspective, that the person asking that, I would now have found out that I sometimes want to respond is, are you asking because you really want to know, or are you asking to be polite? And when you get to that core, that raw essence of truth, and it's not by being arrogant or by being rude, by wanting to know that, but it's, once I know, I'll know if I should respond with, I'm having the most terrific day because, or my life is completely falling apart because now I know why you're asking me. And so I think that with what you just said, if we truly pay attention with what our intention is behind what we say, not only to ourselves or what we ask, also to ourselves. Like somebody like Tony Robbins always says, the quality of your life is direct result of the quality of questions you ask yourself.
I'm glad you brought that up.
If you do, and this is, I'll give you one of my secret sauces and why I can help people overcome imposter syndrome or deal with managing their inner critic. And one of my, what I would love to say is my claim to fame is how you can turn your inner critic from your enemy to your best friend. And that's the bare principle of learn the power of powerful questions and learn how to ask them appropriately and be willing to listen to the answer when you ask it. Not hope that because you asked a certain question, you're expecting a certain response. And if you're able to accept the response of the question you're asking, you're going to be in a better position to handle the truth, which is the message in the madness.
So you're talking about both the quality of your questions and interactions with people and yourself as well.
100%. Absolutely. 9 times out of 10, I mean, think about it right now. How many times do you go in passing and say, hey, hi, hey, how you doing? Do you really actually want to know? Is it just being polite? Is it that we've been accustomed to do that? And when you find that you're acting out of or with intention, your life is going to be conducted in a completely different way. You know this as well, like somebody like Joseph McClellan III talks about approaching somebody with love. You can magnetize somebody's response or their energy based on what you're portraying inside. And when you do something, and we're talking just bare basic 101 principle of saying something as simple as, hey, how you doing? Is that really a question or is it rhetorical? And if it's really rhetorical and you don't care, why'd you say it? And if it was to be polite, why not just say hello? So all of these powerful questions, If we're able to do this and conduct ourselves in a way that we address people in our everyday life and we practice that muscle, imagine how good we're going to be when we practice that muscle within ourselves. Because most of the time when we're speaking to ourselves or we're bashing ourselves, God, you're not good enough. You're never going to make it. You're not going to amount to something. Oh, this work is completely crap, or whatever it is that you're saying. You don't deserve this, which is 9 times out of 10, not even your own thoughts. It's programming that's coming down from generations past and your upbringing that you picked up on subliminally that now you have instilled in your own brain's programming. But if you start to think, how can I ask myself a better question? And if I ask myself a powerful question and I get a powerful answer that I may not like, how can I rebuttal that response with a secondary powerful question that is going to pinpoint what I'm actually looking for, which is, where's the message? There's always truth. There's always truth to something. There's a bit of truth to anything usually most people say, including to ourselves. I'm going to give you an example to just really put a button on this. Is I've been in this position where I wanted to lose weight. And this is one that is very controversial to people. There was a point in my time, in my recent past, where I almost hit 200 pounds. I've been about 165 pounds most of my life, right? So 200 pounds for me was really excessive. Now, I know that I'm a fit person. I'm a peak performing athlete. To me, I know that if I look at my scale where it says 200 pounds, I know I'm not overweight. I know that I'm fat. If I say to myself, God, Jay, you know what? You're slightly overweight. You need to kind of tone it and pay attention to what you're doing. My actions are going to be different than if I tell myself, oh, you're fat. I'm going to respond differently. Now, it goes the same way if I go overboard and, excuse the language, oh, you're a fat F, right? Oh my God, you're obese and you're disgusting, or what? My response is going to be different. But even for those that have negative self-talk, and which at one point I said, oh my God, JJ, look at you, you're disgusting right now. Because of my powerful questions and the process of learning that, I was able to decipher, you really are unhappy where you're at. You really need to make a drastic difference now, not tomorrow, now. And if you don't pay attention, you're going to miss the boat of momentum to get you to take action to do something about your unhappiness. But I was only able to decipher all of that from me saying to myself, you're disgusting. I don't even want to look at you right now. And this is me. I'm telling you what I'm saying to myself in my head. But because I know the power of powerful questions and sequencing, I'm able to decipher that, you know what, you're being a lazy F. You know, you're not paying attention to yourself. But the truth of the matter is my inner critic isn't trying to hurt me. He's trying to help me.
So self-awareness sounds like it's a key thing that you definitely like demonstrate within yourself, and you like to encourage for other people.
100%. And I think it goes beyond just self-awareness. Is not just your self-awareness, it's just awareness in general of what is your truth. What can you tolerate? What are you willing to risk? What are you willing to gain? You know, and sometimes we dismiss, I'm a very self-aware person, but if somebody else says something to me, if I'm telling myself that, let's say in this premise, in this example, if I'm calling myself ugly and fat and disgusting and all this and that, I know how it makes me feel. Now, if somebody else from the external world, I'm only projecting that because it's inside of me. And someone's going to pick up on that. And if they respond on that, because it is my truth, not theirs, that they're picking up on, and all of a sudden I am going to now fall into a deep depression because I heard it from the external world. If anything, if you're truly aware of all of your surroundings, not just your self-awareness, but the awareness of others on what you're projecting outwards, you're going to realize that it's kind of like those hidden subliminal messages coming from everywhere, like a constant reminder, hey, you're not paying attention to something. Hey, you need to wake up right now. There's something going on. And so that would be my biggest thing of self-awareness, powerful questions, and knowing the awareness around you, because the divine energy, cosmic universe, call it God, call it whatever it is that anyone believes in, they're always guiding you. We are always guided to what we want to live and how we want to live.
Yeah. And you made me think of an example actually that I heard on another podcast a while ago about when you hear something someone else says and, you know, it might offend you sometimes, it's actually because you might have this underlying insecurity within yourself. And the example I remember given was a guy wasn't doing so well with his business, and then someone said to him, "Oh, your business sucks," or something like that, and he got really angry. But then he talked to his coach about it, and his coach said, "How would you feel if someone just said you've got? I know you dye your hair a little bit, but they said to this guy, how would you feel if someone told you your hair's purple?" And he'd be like, "I just think that's a bit weird and untrue." It goes, "Exactly, but you got offended by the first one because you feel an insecurity within it." So that made me think of that one as well, that sometimes when someone else says something, it's wise to look within yourself and actually think, what's going on with inside my own self-talk right now? So I appreciate you bringing that one up. So
I love that you said that, because the truth of the matter is there's so many, it's obviously a bigger formula that I'm kind of crunching in on what has helped me help myself and so many different clients, but it's also the meaning that we give words. It's also the significance that we give a word and the meaning behind that. Prime example, I am a Latino male. I am tatted up everywhere, right? And I walk in, I mean, this is pre-pandemic, because if I would have ever walked into a grocery store or a bank with a mask, I guarantee you I would have been face down on the ground with my hands up and somebody saying freeze, you know, because of how I look, right? Obviously now with the pandemic and where we are in the world, having a bandana or a mask on my face is acceptable. Nevertheless, the point is I grew up with a lot of racism, with a lot of abuse, with a lot of bullying, right? And I had words, racial slurs, spick, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't want to say in this programming, that I know most of anyone can either relate to, understand, have seen racial hatred, right? And then when I got through this self-awareness and this real fundamental understanding of not only powerful questions, the meanings we give words, what I value, and my rules behind what I value and how I value it, I realized I can have somebody come to me and call me the most horrific thing. And matter of fact, on one of my social media posts that I just really did, that just recently hit almost 117,000 views, right? I had one person disagree with my post and called me a fudge packer. The implication being that I'm gay or whatever the case may be. And his statement was, you know, what you say and what you speak isn't really true, because I'm going to call you a fudge packer and you're going to block me, right? My post was about not comparing yourself to social media. My post was about, you know, not caring what the external world is. And I truly mean that. Now, my response to this person and or anyone is, okay, you have significance to that word, but that word means absolutely nothing to me. That word means whatever I want it to mean. That word means that I am going to take a fudge and pack it in somewhere, and I can create whatever meaning I want out of that word and put whatever significance I want to that word. And I could either empower you or disempower you. And I can empower me or I can hurt me. And so with all of this knowledge and knowing how to apply it in a sequence, that's when you get the understanding of the message to the madness.
Yeah. Really enjoy how you put that perspective on things there. And yeah, I do enjoy your reels and your videos, JJ. So always good entertainment and great messages alongside it. So keep it up, keep it up. Of course, you don't need me to tell you that, but just wanted to say appreciate that. So one thing I was going to sort of ask you about is you were just talking about, obviously sometimes there are, you know, negative comments, and it's the way you interpret it. As you kind of went through your own journey and when you started helping other people with their inner critic and their self-talk, how important is it to get a good quality of peers around you?
It is probably one of the most important things. It's always that cliche saying, show me who your friends are, I'll show you what your life is going to be, right? We are the sum and the average of the 5 people that we spend the most amount of time with. You know, there's also another equation that's known. Tell me the income of the 10 people that are closest to you, and you're probably the average of all 10. And if you start thinking about it, it's like, how can you, if anybody ever wants to become a millionaire and you don't have millionaire friends, how will you ever know how to become a millionaire? If you want to get into an industry that you know nothing about and you're hanging out with only people that are in your industry, how will you have influence around you to motivate you to be able to do something different? So one of the things, the hardest things that I had to do in my journey, in my self-awareness, my self-development life, and my own development was I had to leave 95% of the people that were in my life, family included, behind. And when I say leave them behind, I don't mean that I am better than. I don't mean that they are not worthy. I don't mean that they are not good people. What I mean is that I have a precise vision for my life in a certain amount of time that I want to accomplish it in. And by powerful questions, I ask myself, who do I need to be around? What influence do I need to have in my life? And how can I learn faster by having people that are doing it, have done it, and are way beyond my knowledge and experience, so I can gracefully and gratefully be the dumbest person in the room to get further faster. And within that included my mom, my dad, my sister, my ex-fiance at the time, my friends, my best friend at the time, my working peers, because I looked around and I noticed that I was not around any single person that I could look at their life in all pillars: spirituality, religion, finance, career, contribution, that I would say, I want that. I was not inspired. Doesn't mean that they're bad. Doesn't mean that they aren't great people. But for what I wanted to 10x my life and then some. And so I had to create, when I say leave behind, and I wanted to come back to that, I had to leave what I knew and face my fears to be in the presence of things I didn't know, and be okay being ignorant or dumb or unexperienced or whatever word you want to associate with entering into the unknown. And at that point, I recognized that there was toxicity around me, influence of people seeing my world through their eyes and their capability and their willingness to achieve greatness, which did not support my vision, because no one has the gift that God or universe or whatever it is that you believe in instilled in you. And so when people say, what are you thinking? You're crazy for doing that. You're never going to make that happen. Or are you sure? Is because they're seeing life. They're trying to see your vision through their eyes and their experience and their knowledge, which God, universe, Allah, whoever, didn't put your gift in them. They put it in you. And so when I realized I had toxicity around me, I had to separate myself, leave what I knew behind, create boundaries around me, get the influence that I needed, and build myself up so that I could go back to my family and say, okay, I now know where every single person fits in and how they fit in into my life, because I will no longer allow other people's opinions to affect my reality.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great answer. And it actually sounds like, quite a simple question. Don't hang out with, or simple sort of principle. Don't hang out with a bunch of negative people if you want to feel good. But the problem is, most of us are not even conscious to what we're doing half the time. We've grown up in this environment, right? So we're like, and when I say negative, it doesn't necessarily mean toxic, like people are horrible and things like that. That's the second point I was going to make. But half the time we're not conscious to some of our habits. And actually, for me, being around uplifting, great people definitely builds me up even more. And like you said, like being the dumbest person in the room, I love doing that because, you can outgrow people, but actually who's going to push you further? And yeah, then the second thing you said, and I was kind of touching on it a little bit there, is we're not talking about like leaving people who are necessarily like toxic, horrible people. We're just talking about people who perhaps don't support, or spending less time with people who don't support or understand that dream, that vision as much. So I'm really, really glad you said that. And I always like to ask this question and talk about it, because half the time we're not conscious about the information we're taking in. We're always taking in information. If we're surrounded by negativity and limiting beliefs coming into us, it's really going to make that work really hard. And that inner critic work you're doing is going to be a challenge as well if you've got that negativity. So thank you so much for your perspective on that as well. So appreciate that. So JJ, we've had an amazing conversation and I've really, really enjoyed it. So kind of, as we look to sort of wrap things up, are there any kind of like final points you'd like to share about your work you've worked with people, any other points we perhaps not discussed?
Something that you just said resonated with me. When you really think about how often we think of what other people are going to say, what other people are going to think, we really limit our full potential, our genius, if you will, our greatness. And how I've learned to approach life from my own experience. Because, as an example, when you're an entertainer and you're auditioning for a part, that there's a plethora of other people auditioning for the same part that look like you, that have your talent, or are better, smarter, more good looking, more talented, or whatever. Somehow you get it, or sometimes you don't. When you know that that is true, you've got to realize why, if we are all born by ourselves and we all die by ourselves, why would it ever really be of importance to really care about what others are going to think? I'm not talking about like if you're trying to hurt somebody or not, anything like that. But there's a principle and there's a strategy that I teach, and it's basically an idea. And it's the concept of so what? And this is something that I'll leave with you and the listeners to try this, right? And this is like the Cliff Note version of it. So what stands for stand out with heart and tenacity.
Oh, love it.
That's what so what stands for. And I want to put this into your mind to shift perspectives. If something bad happens to you, you crash your car, you get beat up, you lose your job, you lose a limb, someone dies. And this is usually where a lot of people have a hard time grasping this concept. And I want to share this lightly, because when you understand what so what really means, so what means You're not the only one that's ever experienced this. If you can find one person that can stand out, and most of the time, someone who's dealt with travesty, like heartbreak, tragedy, whatever, you'll always find someone who stands out with heart and tenacity to overcome whatever obstacle they went through, from rape, child abuse, murder, whatever the case may be. From days in the Bible, if you ever read it, to the common day man or woman, there will always be somebody that has overcome something that any one of us have ever gone through. And the so what principle is if you can think of just one person that has overcome whatever you've gone through, they've already paved the way for you to do it. So I invite everybody listening to this, and this is what I teach, and obviously I go into depth about how to learn this practice. But if something ever happens, try just saying, so what? The first thing that comes out of your mind, and really tune into it. I crashed my car. So what? I didn't die. Because there's always a bigger problem than the problem you think you're facing. And right now I can speak on the pandemic, and believe me, I've had people, family and friends, that have passed. And in a short amount of time from COVID and the illness and everything like that, there's been a lot of grieving. And I don't say it to be insensitive, but if I were to sit and pay attention to how many funerals or how many deaths or how much grieving there has been in such a short amount of time, and it's enough for anyone to fall into depression. But if I can implement the philosophy of, so what? I'm not the only one. That lightens the load. I'm not saying don't grieve. I'm not saying don't go through that mourning process. I'm not saying don't go through whatever process you got to go through to deal with whatever you're faced with, but learn to take the weight off and not generalize what's actually happening in the moment by singularly pulling you into a pigeonhole that you're the only one that's ever experienced this. Because if we are the only ones that's ever experienced that, then that means that there's no influence, or there's nobody that can show you a way out. Then you're really screwed. But the truth of the matter is, there isn't really anything that any one of us can go through at this day and age that someone else hasn't gone through, and or worse. So the principle of so what is, try that. Just no matter what happens to you, so what? I lost my job. Probably might not be the only time I've ever lost a job. Probably might not be the first or the last. But if you've ever gotten another job, it's possible to get another job again. And so when you start thinking of that, and then when you start diving into each letter of what that means, stand out with heart and tenacity, and you implement that, okay, how can I stand out with heart and tenacity to overcome this situation? And just by simply walking around the world and saying, so what? So what? It's a bad day. So what? I didn't make this. So what? I failed in that. You're going to start seeing a different reaction within yourself, that you'll start viewing things differently and understanding them differently. And then you can really get to the core of the solution rather than focusing on the problem. And that's what I would love to leave with everybody, to just invite you to say, so what, a little more often, and truly find a way to stand out with heart and tenacity to overcome any obstacle, because there's never an obstacle too difficult to overcome, because there was always an obstacle you thought you couldn't accomplish until you did.
Yeah, love it. And it reminds me of the phrase, Tony's phrase, success leaves clues. And you can even see it within yourself, or when you've overcome things before, or other people out there who have got some inspirational stories. And yeah, love that little acronym you got there. So what? So JJ, it's been immense value you've given today, and people definitely will get so much more value, connecting with you. Where can people find you?
Well, my website that just recently launched is jjvillarcoaching.com. You can find more information about me there. And then one of the things that I would love to share with everybody that's interested in learning more about this, the tools that I teach and how to really overcome that negative self-talk to be more successful in life and in business, as well as deal with and overcome imposter syndrome. On November 22nd, from 11 p.m. to 1 p.m. my time, which I'm in Los Angeles time, I'm holding a 2-hour workshop solely based on this principle. And it's a complimentary workshop that is going to unveil the boot camp that is designated and designed to help people with their little inner critic. And you will later on this evening, I will be launching the site. You can find it on my website on jjvillarcoaching.com, but it'll be the invitation on a standalone. It's either on the programs tab, but you'll also be able to find it through just thelittleinnnercritic.com. And you'll be able to sign up. And I encourage everybody to sign up, come in. It's a complimentary workshop. I'm going to give you so much value, so much tools that you can really implement immediately to overcome whatever negative self-talk is holding you back. And then also present you an incredible offer to participate in my next Little Inner Critic Boot Camp that will start as of December 13th, that I have been able to help so many people around the world really step into the greatness, from somebody who wants to leave their 9 to 5 and become an entrepreneur, from somebody who wants to move out of their country and start fresh in the United States, to somebody who wants to become a better coach, to someone who wants to just know how to communicate with themselves and other people better. So the possibilities are endless. The invitation to you and anyone in your community, from my heart to yours, is check out the website, jjvillarcoaching.com, and sign up under the programs tab, or you can find it through thelittleinnnercritic.com as well.
Awesome. That sounds really, really exciting and definitely transformational stuff. So what we'll do is we'll put these links in the description as well, so everyone can access and get some more value and learnings and teachings from you, JJ. So once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a great pleasure. I always love being able to co-elevate with people. And again, if there's anything I could ever do to add more value to you and your listeners, please don't hesitate to ask. I'll always be here with an open heart.
Awesome. Thank you, JJ. And that concludes our episode today. But remember, work on your self-confidence every single day. And I'll see you in the next episode.